Greetings all. We're resuming our GitLab highly available horizontally scaled setup. This is part 3 where we'll cover doing the Redis servers and the Sentinel servers. This is matching much of what you see here with the exception of there will be 1 load balancer, 2 application servers, and 3 Redis servers. This will be done on GitLab 11.11.3. And all the Redis servers have already had GitLab set up on the omnibus instructions seen here, with the exception of we didn't pass in an external URL. So let's go ahead and get started. To this, we're going to start on Redis 1, which will act as our master Redis and master Sentinel server. I've already set up the etc host file, which you can see here, so it can talk to everything else. So with that, we are going to go ahead and start by editing the gitlab-rb file. We're going to delete everything that's there. And then we're going to paste in some very specific configuration for the master server. So what we're here is we're specifying the roles as Redis master role and Redis Sentinel role, which will disable all components except what the Redis master and Redis Sentinel need to proceed. We're binding the IP address to the internal IP address. Big note here, while generally you could use a public IP for Redis, it is not advisable. There are security security issues in play with that. So you do want to try to bind it to an internal IP address whenever possible. I'm specifying the Redis port, but that is the default. And then I'm going to tell Redis its password is password, not very secure, which is why we're putting this for sure on an internal IP address. We're also going to specify the master IP address, which is Redis 1 in this case. And we're telling it not to do auto migrations. We don't want it doing that. And we're also binding Sentinel to that, the internal IP address. Now down here, I'm setting the quorum for Sentinel to 2. Quorum's a bit of a complex concept, but basically there's kind of 2 different ways you can tune it. If a quorum is set to a value smaller than the majority of Sentinels we deploy, you're basically looking at it being more sensible to master failures, so it can easily trigger failover. Whereas if you set it to a value greater than the majority, we're looking at Sentinel being able to failover only when a very large number, larger than the majority, of the Sentinel servers are in agreement that the master is down. As we have 3, I'm setting it to 2. So I'm actually going with the second thing of I want 2 of these servers to agree that the master is down before we conclude it's actually down. Now with that, we're going to do a gitlab-ctl reconfigure. If I can type, reconfigure. And we're going to wait for this to complete before we even touch the other 2 because we really need to configure the master setup first. So we'll wait for this to complete. With that completed, we need to tell it to skip the auto reconfigure. So to do that, we simply have to touch the file etc gitlab skip-auto-reconfigure. Now with that, our Redis master Sentinel master is set up. So we can go on and move to Redis 2 and 3, which will act as our secondaries. Now, once again, we're going to edit gitlab-rb. We're going to delete all of this, and we're going to paste in our new values. Now, some of this will seem very familiar from the master, in that we're specifying the roles, but this time we're giving it the Redis slave role. That tells it it's a secondary. We're binding it to its internal IP. Again, do not use public. We're defining the Redis port. The password is password. Master IP will be the IP address of your first Redis server, the master we just set up. We're telling it not to do auto migration, and then we're telling Sentinel to bind to the internal IP address. Once again, we're setting quorum to 2 to tell it that when 2 of these servers agree that master is down, we can do a failover. So we're going to go ahead and do gitlab-ctl reconfigure. And while that works, we're going to go ahead and set up Redis 3. Once again, we're going to edit gitlab-rb, delete everything, and paste it in here. And this time, we need to take away that. And we need to take away that to bind it to the correct one. But other than that, the settings are the same. So we're going to do gitlab-ctl reconfigure, and we need to wait for this to finish. Now with that finished, we need to tell it to skip the auto reconfigure, so we will once again touch that file. We're going to go ahead and do that on 2 as well. With that, our Redis Sentinel setup is now complete, so we're ready to move on to the next steps, which will be our NFS and load balancer, which we'll be using HA proxy for.